Whakatapu ki he awhio ai otua, koe tamai alo pea moe lau maalie mā oni oni. Whakatapu ki he kakai oi whonua moe kau a ahi kotoa pe. I want to acknowledge the Yagara and the Yugambeh language speaking peoples, the traditional landowners on the lands in which I stand in this time. My people are dying before their time. In Queensland, Samoans are 7 times more likely to be hospitalised from preventable diseases such as diabetes 2 in comparison to the Australian population. My doctoral studies explored the perspectives of 3 generations of Māori and Pasifika peoples in southeast Queensland in terms of what does it actually mean for them to be healthy from elders, parents and young people. Now, whilst I desperately wanted to use a Pasifika methodology, given it's with Pasifika people, I actually could not find any robust a methodology that incorporated a robust data analysis from a Pasifika methodology. So therefore I had to use constructivist grounded theory and the Talanoa methodology. However, due to significant ongoing tensions between the elders, parents and young people, I desperately needed to find something more. And that's how I drew from our traditional cultural heritage of the fala, which is a Tongan word for traditional mats. And I could liken the fala, what it is for our Pacific people, it's kind of like the equivalent to what the Mona Lisa is for the French. And so it carries very strong traditional cultural heritage because they were weaved by our ancestors and passed down. So what I did is I drew from the 10 stages of making the fala. The first stage, and that's what I used to adapt and conduct my research. So the first stage was tā oi lau I kie, which means selecting the kie leaves. Now, with the traditional mat, not every tree makes a traditional mat. There are specific trees that you have to actually find, and that's the kie leaf, the kie tree. So in applying that to my research, it wasn't just about getting any Pacific person, not just the token native. It's being very selective in who we find to be able to inform and speak into this research. So to do that, I had to speak to the local people and understand who are the key prominent elders in their community that were well respected because of their service within community, who were other leaders that were also known by the people and I guess recognized for their capacity of serving their community. So it's very important. It's not just randomly select people, it's find out from the local context who matters to them because they've been there through the thick and thin serving community. The second stage was to'oetala, which is cutting off the sharp edges of the kie leaf. Now, to do that and applying it to my research, it was about the literature review. I did a research around the whole of the world to find out how given that my people are dying before their time, not just in a local context, but nationally, globally, what's actually happening. So the literature review showed me the strengths, but I also had to hear from the people and take it, tailor it to the context and hear from the elders in this local space. So cutting off the sharp edges is really hearing from the local people. What are the strengths of the people? Don't just assume that you've read a literature review and you can just one size fits all onto the people. It was really about going back and hearing the voices of the community locally to tell me what their strengths are and what are some of the challenges. Now, the third part of the stage was takai, which is coiling. So what that was all about was gathering the 3 different generations together. And in our cultural context, you can't just mix and put everyone together and mix and mingle and talk about these questions. You have to be you have to be mindful of the cultural protocols. So that's the best way to do it was to be gender specific and age specific, because of our hierarchical structure, our young people won't necessarily speak when there's elders in the room because they know their place according to the hierarchy. So to coil the discussions, I had to be mindful of that cultural protocol and have the elders, male and female, in their own spaces, the young people in their own spaces, so they were safe enough to talk and answer the questions and share what their thoughts are. The fourth context is haka, which is boiling. And what that was all about was allowing for time and space to be able to talanoa, to share, to have unconcealed storytelling. It wasn't like, I've got 15 questions, just wham, bam, thank you, man, and I'll take your knowledge and run. It was really, the whole process of boiling is just like a pot on the fire camp. It takes time to spark up the wood, to let the fire burn, to let the water then boil. And before you know it, because you've given the time and space, you get the hot information that needs to be able to inform the research. So boiling is a very key point. The fifth one is tatala, which means unveiling. Now this is where the data analysis phase begins to take place. It was what I did was, after I got the transcripts, I began to read through every single line. I know that was hours and hours. Read through every single line, and after each line I would put a specific context. What's happening here? So for example, when I started with the elders, the Samoan elders, the first word, the first sentence I remember still to this day, I would always start with humour and edifying the elders and kind of like thanking them for their service. And that's a cultural protocol. You don't just get straight into the business. It's almost like you have to do a bit of a dance, a waltz. You start first by bowing. So all of those cultural protocols were important in the unveiling. And so I had to do that line by line of all the transcripts. After I had line by line coded everything, ngahi e maya. And what that was about, it was about weaving a rope between all those codes and creating key themes that would come up from the narrative that was relevant. And when I'm saying those key themes, you have to understand cultural practices, protocols, to be able to best identify the themes. And so how I would do that, I had to make sure that it wasn't just my own biases. I would go back to the participants. I'd speak back to the elders. I think, is this about humour and the importance of humour when it comes to our health? Is this about spirituality? So it was also checking and connecting each time with the elders, with the participants, to make sure I was clearly giving them voice in terms of their practices. Tuku itahi, so that's soaking in the ocean. Now, remember how I said initially I really had problems with what the elders think about health, what the parents think about health, and what the young people. So for a period of time, because of the strong tensions and differences between generation, I had to tukuitahi, which means soak in the ocean. Now, in that process of creating the fala, the leaves are taken to the ocean for 3 weeks and they're left to the ocean to play their part in creating new indigenous knowledge, fala. And so those leaves change from being green pandanus tree leaves to, they change in form and in texture. And after 3 or 4 weeks, they can then begin to be used to start weaving our traditional mats. So that soaking in the ocean was the game changer for me in terms of finding a way to bridge the divides between the generations. The 8th stage is ha'alo, which is to straighten or smooth out the leaf. Now, usually once the leaves have been soaking in there without any human manipulation, but allowing the ocean to help play a part in creating knowledge, you bring the leaves out and then you have to sit there and scrape every leaf to take off all the excess, whatever else is in that leaf. Now that part, and how I applied that to my research, is I would go through each talanoa, each story again, to try and I'd ask questions. Are there changes happening in this context and in this conversation? If there are changes in terms of people's health, what are the factors that are causing that change? If there are barriers to their health in this conversation, what are those barriers? So the smoothing out, the ha'alo process was really going in to go deeper, have a deeper dive in and analyze the dialogue that was coming from the community. Now, the very last part, la langa, which is weaving, was the process of taking all that I had been given by my people and begin to find ways that, even though the elders had a different perspective and the parents had a different perspective and the young people had a different perspective, it was about finding common ground to interweave all those words to be able to create one holistic mat that best represents my people. And the foaki part means gifting, where I would take that back, and now I am currently a community research fellow in the very people that I have been working alongside during my 9 years of the thesis study. I studied, I worked in community. And now how I'm gifting it back for Waka is that I'm using that knowledge from the people to continue to improve the work of the holistic health of our people with them, not just about them, but alongside them. So I gift to you the Fala methodology, and I hope that you enjoy using it with your community, and make sure that it's about taking the voice of that local context and weaving in the beautiful stories that they have in terms of whatever research you're doing. So be blessed, and I hope you enjoy the Fala methodology.